I don't actually spend a lot of time on Instagram.
I really do. It's not that much time. I don't spend that much time like just wandering around on it.
Mhm.
Like it's not like a Wikipedia black hole. You know what I mean? Or like a YouTube.
I get lost in YouTube.
Right. I don't.
But Instagram, I'm sure you could go down that path.
I'm sure you could. In any case, it's so crazy that it's taken this long to. Oh, this is on.
Yeah.
It's crazy that it's taken me this long to find that.
How many followers?
147,000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so to have just somebody who's conscious of that
Yeah.
and who's like, that's part of the intention,
Yeah.
and to include like the Brazilian thing, the what anyway, we'll talk about that later, but to like be deliberately making sure everyone.
I really like that.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm excited by this. I'm like, I want this to exist right now.
Cool.
Because I've kind of been like playing around with all these subscriptions because a lot of them are offering them for free right now.
Where are you getting? Can you send them to me?
Yeah, there's this really good article I found actually on like Good Housekeeping.
Of course.
Because of course I read Good Housekeeping.
Yeah. Subscribe.
That had all these. I think it's still going on. Like it was initially for April. A lot of them were like for the end of March, month of April. But yeah, it was just like all these different fitness classes and like the free promotions, ranging anywhere from like a week trial to like 90 days for free, which is really great. But so one of the things we signed up for, I'm sure some people like it, was Gaia. It's like a yoga platform.
That's what I was picturing, and that's what I thought.
Yeah. The yoga is okay. But there's some content on there that I'm like, all right. Like there's a lot of documentaries and series on there that are like aliens.
What?
Yes.
Aliens. Really?
And like ancient ruins. And
ancient ruins.
A lot of like law of attraction stuff. A lot like there's a whole marketplace of spiritual documentaries that I did not realize existed. It's like Teal Swan would do well in there.
I think I might have. Sounds very like something that I somehow have ended up on a list for, and I didn't have enough clarity inside my soul to unsign up because I was like, there's got to be some reason I did this.
Yeah.
Is it Mind Valley? No.
Oh my God, Mind Valley. Can they stop?
Are they on you?
They're yeah.
Fuck, I can't find it. Remember when Aaron was like, the sound's not working. That was so funny. I can't fucking find it. Maybe I did actually pull the plug. But it was some like thing that was like all these really weird classes that were like definitely on manifesting. Damn it! I can't find it. This is a waste of time.
It was more just like, you know what I can deal with manifesting. It's the medium that makes it kind of weird. I don't know how to describe it to you. It was just very like very spiritual looking. Like all that
branding.
Like lots of like glowy lights.
Really?
Very glowy. Yeah.
Like from within?
Well, no. Like, like when the mandala like lights up or something, where there's that kind of effect. It all kind of looked like that.
Yeah.
Like, oh, all right.
That there's like an equivalent. You remember how you were like, if you believe in conspiracies, do you just like believe in all of them?
Yeah.
I don't think that you
It's
do.
like, well, if you do yoga, then you also do crystals.
Yeah, there is like some. Yes. And you're like, wait. These things are actually not alike.
Yeah. Why is it all lumped together? Why is it like, oh, you're spiritual? Well then. Welcome. Like, and suddenly you're supposed to believe in the gamut of all of the things that are in that world.
Well, I guess there are some people who do like who are in the Venn diagram middle of all of those things. But they're giving everybody a bad rap, and you need to stop.
And it's also just like, yeah, just because one thing is true doesn't mean that it's all true.
Yeah.
Like,
Can I take my contacts out?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, agree.
Numerology.
Numerology.
Yeah. It's weird to just be alone talking to myself. So my mom is into numerology, and she's one of those people who, because she's into one thing, she gets into everything.
Who is this?
My mom. And I remember growing up, she was like, ah, yes, Janessa, you're too.
Growing up, she's always been into it.
Always.
No,
I've told you this, that like she would experiment on us. Like, no. She wouldn't do like harmful things, but she was taking a bunch of courses in like Chinese medicine or Bach flower essences or reflexology or all of these things. So have you ever taken Bach flower essences?
No!
Bach. They're flower essences, little droplets in water that you're supposed to take every day.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, like what do you do? I don't know how she prescribed it to us, but she'd be like, oh, okay, so so you're anxious and you're procrastinating a lot, or I don't know what the hell she would do. And so she would have us take like 14 drops of geranium and 5 drops of mistletoe and 7 drops of I don't know what.
That's really funny. No wonder. No wonder you're like, I don't know if I feel anything. I don't know. Is it working? I don't know.
Right. Okay.
It's all a wash.
Yeah. But then those things become comforting in a weird way too.
Yeah.
Or like I go home and I open the kitchen cabinet door.
Yes.
Vitamins. And I'm like, ooh. And I just start popping whatever the hell's in there.
What a funny thing to like go like binge.
Yeah.
This and some that.
Yeah.
That's very funny.
Do you live in tarot? Tarot cards?
Not exactly. But I don't know very much about it. So it's one of those things that I like go along with in certain situations. I don't know what situations I'm talking about. But like some people who are just like free. So there was a person in my teacher training class that I've talked about who does like Reiki and clearly now is a yoga teacher and works at a meditation place and those other things. And she did like reading. Like I fail to see what readings have to do with Reiki.
Yes. Exactly.
But she does reintegrating. And I guess
Does
maybe now
she
yoga.
combine them?
I mean, I think so. So in those situations, like I've been in certain situations where like suddenly it's like take a card, and I'm like, okay.
Right.
Or even like I know this is not tarot, but I think it was New Year's first class of the New Year or something. Claire had us all like pick cards from a pack of cards that were all from the Untethered Soul. Like
Oh, is that like
it was like a companion.
That's a nice tarot set.
It's not tarot. It's just got it's stuff on it.
Anyway, okay.
It's a fantastic book. So they had some like accompanying cards, but the whole idea of like take something, it's going to mean something, reminds me of tarot a lot.
The it's gonna mean something is kind of like how much of it is that it means something? There's an objective lesson or indicator in that versus whatever you put on it.
False binary.
Yeah. So it's like the horoscope. Yeah.
I mean, theoretically,
In which case, like, sure, it's doing something.
right. Which is why I feel like the couple of times it's come up, I've been like, all right.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be useful, or is it?
Yeah.
Is there something to get here?
Right.
So, but I've never been like, what is really going on in tarot? Like, what is happening in numerology? There are certain things that I've like never looked up. And those are things that I guess I say I don't really, like. No, I'm not really that. I'm not into that.
What is the basis for this then?
For what?
Wait, I'm actually just thinking of like, what is it that people are actually saying is happening with tarot?
I'm about to look at it.
That there's this deck that has magic powers. Is it the deck or is it you that has magic powers?
No. It's neither.
And by magic powers, I mean like it will reveal. It knows you.
So if that's interesting, that's your definition of magic, because then that means that medicine is magic, and DNA is magic, and like what
No, but
what makes
these
it?
are what I mean by magic is there's no like it's paper.
Mm-hmm.
There's what is it that is capable of doing what it claims to do?
Energy. Energy.
But the cards themselves have energy. This is what I'm asking. I'm actually asking what is it that we're ascribing to when people talk about tarot? The cards have their own energy that when they interact with another person.
I don't think the cards have independent energy.
Is it the cards?
Like if they're in a box under my bed,
yeah, exactly.
They are not magic. Okay. They're not doing magic under my bed.
It's the reader who has the ability to pick the cards that are right.
It's kind of like saying, is Aquarius, Cancer, Aries magic? Like only maybe in the way that we like relate to it, but it in itself Aries doesn't have power. So I don't think the cards
apparently do.
What?
The planets apparently do. That I feel because that whole basis is that like the planets do have a certain power, the stars and the planets do have a certain power, and it dictates like who you are essentially.
Yeah, but it doesn't make the planets like magic, right? It's not like a magic planet.
What I think of magic is what cannot yet be explained.
Okay, well, we can apply that.
Like where there's no scientific reason for what apparently happens to be happening.
Mm-hmm. That's a very wide.
Actually,
That's a lot of things on magic.
yeah. I get really sucked into magical thinking.
Should I read the Wikipedia entry?
Sure, yeah.
This is under history of tarot card reading. One of the earliest reference to tarot triumphs, I don't know what triumphs are, and probably the first reference to tarot as the devil's picture book, is given by a Dominican preacher in a fiery sermon against the evils of the devil's instrument. References to the tarot as a social plague continue throughout the 16th and 17th century, but there are no indications that the cards were used for anything but games anywhere other than in Bologna. Weird. How does that Dominican? Okay. As philosopher and tarot historian Michael Dumet noted, it was only in the 1780s, when the practice of fortune telling with regular playing cards had been well established for at least 2 decades, that anyone began to use the tarot pack for cartomancy. Whatever that is.
Cartomancy?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. The belief in the divinatory meaning of the cards is closely associated with a belief in their occult properties, a commonly held belief in the 18th century propagated by prominent Protestant clerics and Freemasons. One of them was this guy. From its humble uptake as an instrument of prophecy in France, the tarot went on to become a thing of hermeneutic, whatever that means, magical, mystical, semiotic, and even psychological properties. It was used by Romani people when telling fortunes as a Jungian psychological apparatus capable of tapping into absolute knowledge in the unconscious, a tool for archetypal analysis, and even a tool for facilitating the Jungian process of individuation. So they also don't have to be magic to be useful. To be like applicable.
Because Jungian makes me think of what we were talking about, where it's almost like a what's it called? A Rorschach test. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like it's a framework, and then your interaction with it is the thing that like animates or doesn't animate it.
Right.
Into being like a transcendent, potentially thing.
So in that, how important is the reader? If it's different, obviously, if you have your own deck.
Probably important.
But a reader, someone who maybe doesn't even know you, then is interpreting the cards, but not for themselves, for another person. Like, I guess this is getting into like medium work or that kind of thing. How does that happen?
How does it happen?
Yeah. How is someone doing that?
I mean, I think there's all different people, so I don't think everyone who's doing something like that is doing the same thing necessarily. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I can't speak for. Let's speak for everyone.
Reading off. It's just whatever's coming to them. I'm getting this from the cards. Like that's what it sounds like mediums are doing. It's like those little voices that we get. Like it's this. Like the first instinct kind of is they're like, I think it's this.
Maybe. The only like 1 or 2 people I've talked to don't describe it as just like thoughts popping into their head.
What do you describe it as?
Like they can actually see and hear stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they can actually hear. It's not their voice going, oh, yeah, what's this?
That sounds the same to me.
Other entities? You being able to hear other entities? Is the same as your own
not
thoughts?
Thinking it. Anyway, okay, let's not get into this. Like you don't create your own thoughts. And they don't actually sound like you. If you actually like chase your own thoughts, they don't actually sound like you.
I think they do.
Really?
Yeah.
Mine don't.
Who do they sound like? Unless you're thinking about, obviously about a person. Like if I'm thinking something about my parent, my dad, my nephew,
Right.
his voice is obviously going to be there. But if I'm just like, I wonder, like, then yeah, it would be. If it's formed into words and not images, not like other non-human sound, like depending on the kind of thought it is. But if it's like a verbal thought, yeah, it's my voice.
How do you know it's your voice? Like, what's the signature? It just feels like you.
Yeah, I recognize it. So like, if I had some kind of psychotic break and whatever, then I would literally be hearing like another person in there telling me to like do stuff. Like actually hear another person in your head.
Like, actually, there's a voice.
Yes.
It's not your voice.
And
Yeah,
you don't like
I
know
don't-
what they're gonna say. So it's not you thinking of somebody else saying something.
Yeah, I don't ever like get my thoughts don't sound. I don't know if that's different than other people.
I think that
There's not
that
a
we-
voice.
There's I find that to be very difficult to do.
Mhm.
Almost everyone has an inner monologue.
I have an inner monologue, but there's not a sound.
What, it's like braille? It's like on paper? Where is it?
It doesn't sound. I don't know.
So
No,
where
I'm
is
not reading it. It's like I'm. Where's my computer now? I don't know how to describe it. Like, it's soundless. I don't know how to describe it. It's like a feeling.
So maybe those are feelings.
No, they're not feelings. They're like pictures or.
Pictures are a
But
kind of
there's
thought.
a like. You know when you're like, okay, quick, think something, and now I'm like under the gun, so I can't do it. But it doesn't sound like anything. It's like weightless.
I mean, I don't like hear a tape of my voice inside my head. But if I were to put voice to the thoughts in words, like the second they become language, it's me.
How do you know it's you?
From these 30 plus years of experience. Just it always being the same. But that's what it usually sounds like.
Just because it's what it usually sounds like doesn't mean it's you.
This is a semantic thing of whether or not it's you. I don't know what that means. I'm just talking about like what voice something is in. If you hear it if it occurs in words, whose voice is it? If it is occurring in words, whose voice is it? And I don't think that like, oh, God sounds a lot like me. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that we are the like instigators of all of our thoughts. I'm not like getting into the
Yeah. No, you're not doing
content.
that. You're just saying like the thoughts are.
That's how they occur. Is
Yeah.
in
They
a
sound.
familiar.
I think you're saying it like the right way. They sound like you. They're in your voice. It's why I've kind of talked to you about how when I actually speak, it's so strange. Sometimes I'm like, oh, that's what I think. Because it's not like what it sounds like in my head. Ever.
Because it sounds like nothing in your head?
I don't know. It's not that it sounds like nothing. It's just like there's a different experience I have.
Yes.
And what comes out of my mouth feels much more representative of actually me as opposed to what goes on in my head. And it's partly,
Representative.
yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
it's part of why like journaling not quite satisfying for me.
But it would be if you talked into a recorder.
Yeah, it would be more. It would be more connected to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know where we started with this.
Tarot.
Oh, just being able to hear the difference between your thoughts and like something else. Like the way I can tell the difference between whether I'm talking and whether you're talking
Yeah.
is because why?
I don't know.
Like, how do I know who's saying what's being said?
Oh no. That's a good question. Because you're doing both of it. Wait. No. It's all inside your head. Don't you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god. That gets so weird and like trippy when you're like, it's all happening inside your head.
What's the it?
The whatever you're experiencing,
Whatever I'm experiencing, yeah.
is all happening inside of you.
Yes.
It's not that like things aren't happening outside of you, it's just that like your experience is all inside your experience.
That makes sense. Is that weird?
Yes, when you actually think about that.
I don't feel like that's true, first of all.
No.
I feel like stuff comes out of my head. I feel like my experience comes out of my head.
Maybe it comes
I don't think that these are the four corners of my experience. I don't think it's contained within my body necessarily.
Okay.
Like there's a like, Western science is like, oh, everything's happening in your brain. Right. So like everything is inside your skull.
I don't know if it's brain. I would say like it's inside your consciousness.
Right. And that
is like where is that? Where's that located? Yeah.
So I don't feel like it's only inside my body. But it makes sense that it's all happening inside my situation.
Situation. I like that actually. That's how we should like stop using the word soul and start using the word situation. I think as a kid, I wondered if one day scientists would be like, "We found it! We found souls. It's right here." And it'd be like a little fatty tissue. Like I don't know.
It might be.
That's it.
It might be. They might in your lifetime do that.
Wow.
You'll be like, holy shit! I fucking called this.
I knew it. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, oh no, there are such things as souls this whole time.
Because you don't have one.
I don't have a soul. Nah.
Right.
I like to be like, do they exist?
You do like to be
Do
like
they?
that.
Is that true? Yeah. Is it true? In which case?
I think so.
You think there's a soul?
Yeah.
What was I listening to earlier? He was saying how like we think that eyes are the seat of the soul. But actually, I don't know if this is right or not.
This was earlier today and it's already source unknown?
No, it's not source unknown. I think it was Sam Harris. And I think it was last night. And so I was a little groggy. Like, actually, eyes don't look different. I don't know if this is true now.
That's totally not fucking. That's
you're
so
like,
not
no,
true.
that's not it.
That's so not true.
It's just that we're reading into like facial muscles around the eyes that changes how they look.
That's what eyes are.
What?
This is all part of when people are like, your eyes are the seat of your soul.
It's the whole.
They don't mean your eyeballs are the seat of your soul.
Oh, I think a lot of people think eyeballs are.
Those people are dumb.
I think a lot of people are like, I will stare into your irises and I will see.
Have you never seen weird shit in people's irises?
Weird shit? What do you mean?
I've seen
like
weird
a sty.
A sty. A sky? What did you say?
Sty.
Not in people's. Yeah.
Yeah. What have you seen?
So you got a sty in your eye, not in your eye surrounding muscles. Sam Harris. Weird stuff. I don't know, like viscerally weird stuff.
What's actually happening though?
I'm seeing weird stuff. Is what's happening.
I mean, I've definitely had an experience where I'm like looking deep into someone's eyes and then like we're both crying. Yeah.
Why are you crying?
Like I'm thinking of one person in particular that it was like, I forget, she was, I poked the bear essentially and been very like, and then she came back and she told me her life story basically. and yeah, I had this experience of like, yeah, it felt like I saw her soul. It's like,
okay. What did you see?
But that's just it. Like I don't know that I saw anything. Like her eye, it's not like her eyes like flash blue or something.
No. This is like that fugly conversation I had with Lauren.
Yeah.
Who got hit.
Mm-hmm.
Where she was like, I don't think that when I think some people are more visual than others. Like my husband's an artist. She was like, when you say the word rose, I don't picture, like, I can't see a rose. And I was like, what do you mean you can't see it?
Yeah.
Because
pretty sure you can. Pretty sure you do.
Like, what's happening right now? She's like, I mean, I know what it is, but I don't see it. And I was like, but how do you know what it looks like if you can't see it? And she was like, I can't remember.
I mean, there's something to this.
Of course you think there's something to it, because
no,
this
but
is
she's
basically...
not. So I'm thinking of a rose. Wait. I know. And I remember you telling me this, and I was like, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
But now, of course, to like defend my position, I'm like, no, but wait. It's blurry. Okay. It's very vague. It's like rose, but it's not fully constructed. I don't have to fully construct it to talk about it.
You don't have to fully construct it to talk about it. Can you fully construct it?
It's still kind of fuzzy. I mean, I think some artists are really good at this. And I'm lazy. I think I'm just lazy. I'm like trying to picture the Beauty and the Beast rose, which isn't even that difficult. But they're just like flashes. If I had to draw it, I could not draw it.
Well, there's a whole other thing happening there.
What is that?
Like it's going from...
How do people like...
It's going from here into like here in like... There's something else. There's another step, And obviously not everyone can draw really great, so...
Well, people who can draw like exactly... I don't know what they're doing. Like, I assume they can just... It's like a photographic memory. They can just see it completely as it actually is without adding or subtracting anything.
That's very scientific.
Like, I think drawing is seeing.
So that's partly what she was saying.
Yeah.
Is it because she can't draw, that means she can't see? And I was like, that's a big leap.
Well, I wouldn't say like...
Because my thing was like, if you know what a rose looks like, you've seen it. Maybe. Because I also feel like when people are like, close your eyes, you're walking down a beach and blah blah blah. There's like a point past which it doesn't get that much more detailed. But I don't know if that's because of laziness.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. I don't know if it's because of laziness or because I can't like actually generate it. And I think she is being kind of weird with herself by being like, but I don't actually see it. And I'm like, of course you don't actually see it like you're
'Cause you're
seeing this because that's not what's happening.
Why can't we actually see it?
Because seeing things means like taking light into your irises and interpreting the lens.
But you know, like how you can be activated by a thought and like something, like you get a thought and then you start feeling all these things.
Mhm.
And like, or you can think back like on a bad memory and then you're like feeling all the things as if it's actually there. And they say it's like because your brain doesn't actually know the difference. Or like your body doesn't actually know the difference between like when you're seeing something in real life and when you're imagining it.
Mhm.
So what is the difference? I mean, obviously the light and the da 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 da, and the thing that like is actually there as opposed to not being there.
So what's the question?
I don't know what the question.
I mean, I think based on what you just said, that like there are emotion centers that are activated in the brain by seeing things, but also by
It sounds like we do see
recalling
things. Then. Like we do fully see things, and I also don't know if maybe it's not so much a matter of like training ourselves to really see it. Maybe there's like something that prevents us from seeing it fully.
I think like efficiency prevents us.
Yeah.
So like, but in acting school, I remember being like made to like really fill stuff in,
Yeah.
and visually was one of the dimensions to fill it in.
Mm-hmm.
To fill it in. Luckily, there are other senses and other things going on, but and that's also the same exercise in part as remember I told you that we talked about some exercise where you'd have to fill in the sentence, I saw a dog walking down the street and it was blank.
Yeah.
That as much as being like allowing it to play on your instrument, as much as it's that, it's like a recall exercise. It's like you have to actually see it. You can't be like, I know what a definition is.
Right.
You have to create it in your imagination in the same way that like a trauma or whatever activates something in your brain. You just were saying,
Yeah.
in the same way. Human life.
So interesting. All of it. Can I go back and be a neuroscientist?
You breathe me.
I really want to figure out what a thought is.
You want to figure it out?
Figure it out.
Cool.
I want to be like, see that's a thought. And then like expand it. Like, you know how they blow up a picture or something? Like blow up that thought.
Enhance it.
Enhance it. Yeah, like da-da-da-da.
Can you read the license plate? Sorry, that's how I. You can
Become a neuroscientist.
study neuroscience.
I would have
To study neuroscience?
to probably finish. I would probably have to go back to chemistry and physics.
Yes, that's certainly true.
Yep.
That's the major reason I haven't studied it.
Yep.
Because it's science.
That's all right. I have to do science.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why when my mother's like, you would be such a good neuroscientist, and I'm like, yeah, except for the scientist part. I'm a good neuron.
Yeah.
I'm neurally very neuricious.
The other reason why I would never coming up with scientific studies is so boring to me. Then so much of science is just like taking down statistics.
Plus, it's like they're always studying the dumbest shit.
Yeah.
Like, so I have a family member who. Maybe I shouldn't talk about stuff like this. Have you ever thought this is wildly inappropriate?
I've thought maybe I shouldn't talk about my mom on here.
But at least, like, she'll see it.
Yeah, that's why.
What I mean is that that's, like, not that bad.
Okay.
It's such, like, a knowable problem.
Yes. I'm gonna not say anything more about my mom. But yeah. It's a knowable problem as opposed to
Like,
something that you
me talking shit about some further relative. Arguably. I don't know. Basically,
so you have a friend who has a relative.
I have a friend. So, like a friend of a friend of a friend has a cousin.
Yeah.
And she has a doctorate in psychology. But it's not the practicum side, it's the research side.
Okay.
And I might actually think like that's actually very interesting because without being responsible for your client's feelings, which I don't think I could be, I'm actually genuinely really interested in psychology. So that sounds cool. But then like she does some stuff from what I heard through the grapevine in positive psychology. But then the studies, the like current day studies are like, we've like really like we've written this paper about like how if someone smiles it makes them feel happy. It's not quite that bad, but it's like I'm like, wait, you spent thousands and thousands of dollars to scientifically demonstrate something that any 5-year-old knows that like friends are nice to have.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing?
Did she come up with like anything of like how that's actually happening? Like that's the valuable data to me. It is like, yes, it's this obvious thing, but then from that place you can like track, I don't know, those muscles are connected to like something up here. Do you think if someone like,
I feel like then somebody would be saying it's not smiling. It's some like very obvious, like a thing that you're like, no kidding.
Yeah.
If you feel
I know it's a no
positive,
kidding.
like
yeah, if you feel,
then you feel better. I don't know. It's like,
oh, but the smiling thing, like when you actually break it down and you're like, what's actually happening? That is curious, and it's very obvious, but it is also curious.
yeah, but they're not studying why such and such.
Okay. Then yeah, probably.
Doctor. What is happening in universities? That this is like a huge part of what someone, I don't know. Sorry. This is the second time I've pitched you with stream today.
Ugh. I mean, a lot of science is about like proving or disproving things
I know, I find that so stupid and irritating.
that are common sense. Yeah.
to me that feels like
And you
we're
could
more
also spend decades of your life working on something that doesn't work. Like, and it's like, well, now we know this definitely doesn't cure cancer.
to me, like stuff like that means that you are now more in love with the scientific method than you are with whether or not positive psychology is a real thing. And that's one of the things that I, in my like science, on my science soapbox,
Mm-hmm.
that I get on and rage from. That's partly what I'm talking about. Like, what exactly is the value of using the scientific method to demonstrate shit everybody knows? That is so dumb. That is so dumb. Like, at least if you spend decades
It's like all those people who are like
on
studying.
a cancer drug, at least you've spent decades trying to cure cancer.
Yeah, you're actually trying to achieve. I mean, because I'm whatever. This is like in my space right now. Like, there's a lot of research being done right now on like mindfulness, and meditation, and the positive benefits of it. And it's like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Like, just look at them.
Yeah.
Do they seem happy?
Yeah, and this happens to like all types of fucking practices
It's like,
that are
oh,
ancient.
no kidding. People should be present. Really?
Yeah, a lot of this shit is ancient, and it's the lack of openness to accepting other forms of knowledge, other forms, like other formats of knowledge.
Yeah. And once it's been
There's
like vetted, like
only
dragged
one
through
way.
the scientific realm, then we can be like, oh, okay.
Okay, it's real.
But then through the process of that, it does kind of become sterilized. I think.
I think
Like
all sorts of stuff
mindfulness
happens.
also. I don't know. Mindfulness.
That's interesting to think, like what happens to it in the process of it getting studied. But yeah, that's like emblematic of this thing, which is that we cannot accept even the most obvious forms of information unless they have passed through a specific machine.
Yeah.
Which is so strange.
But I mean, that's scientific method. It's like,
Yeah, but it's a tool for something, which again comes back to like if you're using it to find a cancer drug, wonderful.
yeah. And then you
But if you're using it to help figure out that people are happier in families than alone, what are you doing? We know that. We know that from different ways. We know that.
yeah. I was gonna say like, oh, but you know, that might be the thing that convinces people. Oh, maybe I should have a family.
Yeah,
Maybe
it
I
might
should
be.
call my mom. But there's something in that too that it's like you can't say that like science exists to prove that science should exist.
Right. Yeah.
Because that perpetuates that line of thinking of like, I'll believe in it when science says
Yeah.
so.
It's like a really weird thing. It reminds me of like, you know, that cliche of people who are extremely smart and are like in the lab somewhere, or like tech people, you know, just the like the cliche.
Yes,
Yes, they don't function around humans. And there's something that I feel like there's an aspect of the scientific method that has taken over our like general. It, to me, the scientific method is like a program that works great, but it's like a program in a lab, in a context, and it dissociates everything around it in order to attempt to isolate variables and factors. Like the whole dynamic of it is by definition not holistic.
Yeah, it has to go very, very narrow and control.
So it feels like the nerds have like taken over.
It's all about control. Like you have to isolate a specific thing.
Right, which is like, okay, that's one way to do things. And it's a good way.
Yeah.
But why are we acting like it's the only way to get anywhere for any reason, for anything? Is the strange part to me. Like, what does science say about my feelings?
I also just feel like it's very antithetical to actually the human experience. And so now the West is very much like science above anything, but that's not what it's great. Like, it's a wonderful tool, but that's not what it's like to be alive.
Exactly.
It's just not. Like,
exactly.
The two actually like very much conflict.
We've just figured everything out. We've just figured it out. And that's like an ongoing cliche about medicine, that people are like, your liver without like looking anywhere.
Yeah.
You know, that's like it's like a cliche. It's like a doctor joke. Not a doctor joke, but it's like a, you know, when they forget that you're a person. That's like how they do it.
Yeah.
That's how they're supposed to do it. Is like,
yeah.
It's very strange. It's almost like, this is going to be an outlandish comparison. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like being like, things should rhyme. Things should rhyme. And then only speaking in rhyme and only letting anyone speak in rhyme. And you're like basically not talking if you aren't speaking in rhyme. I love rhyme. Got nothing against rhyme.
Yeah.
But it would be strange if that took over our idea of like what talking is. That would be weird.
Yeah, like why would you want to live? This is what yeah, that's such a great analogy.
Is it?
It's like, it's a wonderful program. It's a great tool. But you don't want to live inside the program.
Right.
That's not a happy life, actually. Like this
right.
plus this, therefore this.
And ideally, like some people, the nerds, some people live in the program because they are program specialists.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
But we've all sort of taken on a thing that like we don't actually need to take on because we're not the program nerds.
Yeah.
That's not our job.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's strange.
I'm worried for us. I'm worried for humans.
Which us? Humans?
Yeah. I don't think we're doing too well.
Oh, no, we're not. However, it might still be salvageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, when people are up against the wall, that's when they're like, oh, I've got this. They have to be facing death.
Like maybe we all shouldn't be anxious and depressed. Maybe.
What do you mean?
Maybe that's not our natural state.
What do you mean, natural state? We do not love natural state. We're not into that.
Nah?
No, we're into clothes and toilets and age defined. What's it called? We're not into what our natural state is. I don't want there to be hair in your armpits. That is disgusting.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we're that interested in that. I think we'd be doing a bit better because maybe if we were more interested in shit like that, we'd do stuff that would be more in line with the like planet's needs.
Why do we think that we're not affected by what's going on the planet? Like, of course we don't like it. Of course we're not comfortable. Look what we're doing. Like, that feels shitty every single day.
Air conditioning doesn't feel shitty.
No. But waking up and being like, planet's not doing so great. Even if you're like not consciously thinking about that, you know what? Marie Kondo.
We should just send all the stuff into orbit. We should just...
No, because then we have to deal with like, great, now we have space junk. And I know there's already space junk. And it's not good. But Marie Kondo would say like, you know what? You need to go through your closet and get rid of everything. Like all the things that don't fill you up with joy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's eating away at you.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things. And the same is true. It is eating away at us on a subconscious level, all the ways that not every single, but almost all of the West is taking advantage of the planet. I don't think anyone is free of that kind of guilt. Well, I was going to be like, I don't know how much like people in third world countries are contributing to it. I'm not sure.
It's a little like, yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
But yeah. And we're all pretty much like born into a world where it's like, tough luck, you have to continue. You have to do this.
That's so funny. I was saying that to my dad today.
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder if this is all like worth it. This makes me nervous about having kids. I'm not going to. And partly, this is part of the reason why. Like, imagine being like, oh my god, you're so cute. Social Security's defunct and we're all gonna die. But now you're here.
I don't buy into that argument.
What?
I don't think like, oh, let's stop having kids. I think like
I don't
start having kids who.
I don't think that it should be I'm not suggesting that.
Okay.
I'm saying
But for you
I don't
personally.
know if it's an ethical thing to do. To be like, here, isn't life grand? I just kind of don't know if it is. It is.
It is.
But also not. Also, it's not for a lot of people.
Definitely.
So, like,
when I think life is grand, I think like it's grand with all of it. Like it's epic.
That's what people mean, I think. They're
It
like,
is.
oh, isn't this?
It is kind of amazing.
It is amazing. Good. I don't know. I'm very grumpy today, is what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a little bit resistant towards existing. That's the thing. No, but seriously, like, if I really wanted to have kids, I would have a hard time with this. And probably just end up adopting. Because here's the other thing. I can't imagine what the reason would be to have your own children that it isn't about you. Your own biological children.
It is about
Yeah.
because it's like literally you.
Right. And that's what's so wonderful about it. And that's what people want. They're like, oh, but I want to like see me. They're not, I don't know how many of them are actually thinking of everything in the surroundings.
I think they also want the thing that isn't them. Like they, it's a mere, it's inexplicable.
Totally. And we are
It's like,
biologically wired for it.
That came out of me. So like that's pretty much like the combination of us. That's us, and at the same time, not us at all.
Mm-hmm. Not a lot of people know that, but yeah.
That's what is appealing to me. Like how, just like that mystery.
Right. Totally. And we are literally like it's instinct. We for hundreds of thousands of years this has been, but that's a little bit like the veganism thing, which is like, yeah, for a long time I've been programmed maybe to like eat meat. Does that mean I can't not eat meat? No. So I feel a little bit like having biological children in this moment is a sort of like, I obviously don't like look down on people who eat meat, but I'm just like, interesting. I don't know if I can justify that. And I feel the same way with biological children at the moment, that I'm like, interesting. I don't know if I can justify that.
Okay.
And like,
Especially,
it would help the people that are already here.
yeah, especially if like by making the choice to have your own children, you don't adopt.
Which, yeah. There are like so many kids just like farting around. I don't understand, and that to me, like that is a very difficult thing to sit with. The fact that like you could be like, oh, I could be a parent in all of these meaningful ways, like guide someone and support them and help them and have some influence in maybe who they become in a positive way. Like maybe they'll change the world, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, but like I just want to know what it'll look like and I want to feel what it feels like. Like it's literally that.
Yeah.
And people pretend it's the former. That having kids is a lot about the former, but you can have kids without having kids. So actually, I think it's a lot more about the latter than people would like to admit. And I mean, I get it. I am a big fan of my nephew, and in no small part, that is connected to the fact that I like recognize him. He like looks like us and acts like us. Totally. It's just a little problematic. Oh, someone said something. I want to read it.
You don't have to read it.
Yeah, it's just a little bit like, I'm obviously not going to make anyone do anything in terms of eating meat or dairy, but like, yeah, it would be kind of cool if everyone just decided, like, we don't need to torture, like, like, that would be cool.
Yeah.
I would take it. In the same way, I wish people would just like for a second be like, do I have to have biological children? Do I have to the way I have to have hamburgers? I don't know. I think this is the longest we've shot the shit. Ever.
Yeah. An hour at least.
Fuck, it's probably longer.
So should we?
Oh, just over an hour. Shit.
Oh, right. Oh shit. Oh, I forgot. Like you
Does
can
the time
actually
on?
see the time. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's bookmark this.
It's bookmarked in my brain
Forever.
It really is.
Uh,
Because also, I just want to quickly say that it's easy for me to stay sitting here.
Yeah.
Not with a partner that I feel like desperately wanting to procreate. I don't even know what it's called. Um, I think it would be a much harder decision to sit there and do
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
So I'm not pretending it's not a hard thing.
Mhm.
But I wonder how hard it is in the same way that I do sometimes wonder how hard it would really be for someone to stop eating meat. It's all kind of relative.
Yeah.
Call 1-800, adopt a goddamn child, please. I don't think that's a number. It's way too long.
It's all just a fantasy, you know? Like, even you're like, oh, I have a child. Like, the reason you want to have a child, I'm sure there's obviously like a biological drive, but because there's an image in your head of what it's like to have a child and what it will mean and what it will be like and what it will feel like. And it's not going to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if that's the basis for why you're making that decision, so if that's the basis for why you're making that decision, you're basing it on something that will never actually be.
Yes. And for a lot of people, they become so enamored with what actually is because it ends up being like more technical, magical, amazing than you ever imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So they're like, oh, this is the ride, sweet. But for some people, they hold on to the idea.
Yeah.
And that is really, and those are the people who don't realize it's not you.
Yeah.
And it's another person.
Yeah.
And that can be very problematic if they're not able to let go of what the idea was, what the first draft of this looked like when they were like children.
Do animals just instinctively not do that?
Not do what?
Like project themselves onto their kids?
I mean, I don't think they do it in like
I'm trying to think
dysfunctional
like
ways.
mama birds are like, yeah, you're gonna fly now. And yeah, like you would never have like a queen mother bird, do you?
I don't think the frequency is high. Yeah, I don't think the frequency is high.
Weird.
And I feel like if they do, then if they are like that, then that's how we end up with those videos on YouTube of different species slapping each other, which is single-handedly the greatest type of video on the planet.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Like a mother duck and like a fucking squirrel or some weird shit.
Ugh. Ugh. Ugh.
So I think that's what needy mamas do. They just are like, you over there. you seem in need of mothering. And that's what I suggest human mothers do as well.
Yeah.
Want a mother? Get a kid.
Oh my god. There should be like a Tinder for people who need mothers. I mean, and I'm not talking dirty. Like, it's just like, I need some mothering right now. Think of how many like mothers are out there where their kids have left the nest and their kids don't want to hear from them.
This was a little bit on Shark Tank.
Wow, no.
There was a thing called Rent a Granny.
Yes. And it's like, I just want a mom right now.
Yeah.
But you don't want your mom.
Because your mom's not going to mother you.
No, not right. They never do it right. So you swipe through moms, and then you're like, this looks like a nice mom. And then you right swipe. And you're like, hey, what's up? I'm just having a hard day.
I love this idea.
This is actually really good.
Copyright.
Yeah.
You should do it.
Great.
I don't know what that means.
Okay. Ooh. Do you want to talk about War and Peace?
Do I ever?
Last night we read about Napoleon.
Standing.
He was ready to make a speech.
Oh, he was
so ready. He wanted, he was entering Moscow and he couldn't believe that he was actually in Moscow, but he was. And then he wanted to get all the boyars together and tell them, you know what, we've liberated you, essentially.
No.
Welcome to the new world.
No, like, fuck you guys. Because
No,
they're the nobility.
Oh, the boyars, he wanted to say fuck
them. They're the representatives, but it's that he wants to sort of destroy that structure.
Right, okay.
So they would still be the people to talk to.
Right. I thought like he wanted to talk to them because they were like the lesser of the monarchies.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Anyway, he thought there would be a lot of people really excited that he was there.
Yes.
And there were not.
No, not only were there not, like most of them have left.
Yeah.
They've like flown the coop with what little they could carry on their servants' back because they would rather face the great unknown than experience Napoleon's speech.
Rude.
Yeah, he's disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah, did anything else?
There was stuff about cards, wasn't there?
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe you can go me. Maybe I should do one now.
There was a weird little chapter. I felt like last night was a weird reading. There was a weird little chapter where some guy showed up at the Rostovs.
Yes. Totally.
Yeah. We don't know who he was.
He looked like a Rostov.
He looked like a Rostov.
He
He's
quacked
about
like a
18
Rostov.
years old. Showed up, asked for some money, and the servant was like, "Sure, here you go."
She was like, "Oh my god, most definitely."
Yeah.
And he was like, "That was cool." And then he left.
And then he left. We don't know who he is.
Yeah, I'm not certain we will ever come back to him.
I think it's the bastard child of Ilya Rostov.
Seems
And
possible.
Maria Dmitrievna. No, I don't know.
And Mavra Kuzmini. It's her own child she just gave money to.
No wonder she felt so emotional.
Yeah, she was like, what was that? What was something came over me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember what happened in between those two things.
I think there was a lot of the French. We weren't so much with the Russians.
It's almost like yesterday didn't happen.
Ugh. I don't know what we're going to get up to today.
Yesterday was such a good day.
Mm-hmm.
Today was so fun.
Hump day, am I right? How do people say that?
A lot of things people say are really cool.
Okay, so we're on book 11, chapter 23. From an unfinished house on the Varvarka, the ground floor of which was a dram shop, came drunken shouts and songs. On benches round the tables in a dirty little room sat some 10 factory hands. Tipsy and perspiring with dim eyes and wide open mouths, they were all laboriously singing some song or other. They were singing discordantly, arduously, and with great effort, evidently not because they wished to sing, but because they wanted to show they were drunk and on a spree. One, a tall, fair-haired lad in a clean blue coat, was standing over the others. His face, with its fine, straight nose, would have been handsome had it not been for his thin, compressed, twitching lips and dull, gloomy, fixed eyes. Evidently possessed by some idea, he stood over those who were singing and solemnly and jerkily flourished above their heads his white arm with the sleeve turned up to the elbow, trying unnaturally to spread out his dirty fingers. The sleeve of his coat kept slipping down, and he always carefully rolled it up again with his left hand, as if it were most important that the sinewy white sinewy, yeah, white arm he was flourishing should be bare. In the midst of the song, cries were heard. And fighting and blows in the passage and porch. The tall lad waved his arm.
"Stop it!" he exclaimed peremptorily. "There's a fight, lads!" And still rolling up his sleeve, he went out to the porch.
The factory hands followed him. These men, who under the leadership of the tall lad were drinking in the dram shop that morning, had brought the publicans some skins from the factory, and for this had drink served them. The blacksmiths from a neighboring smithy, hearing the sounds of revelry in the tavern and supposing it had been broken into, wished to force their way in too, and a fight in the porch had resulted.
The publican was fighting one of the smiths at the door. Can you look that up?
Yeah, I know. I was like, what's a publican?
Was fighting one of the smiths.
A person who owns a pub. A publican.
Was fighting one of the smiths at the door, and when the workman came out, the smith, wrenching himself free from the tavern keeper, fell face downward on the pavement.
Another smith tried to enter the doorway, pressing against the publican with his chest.
The lad with the turned-up sleeve gave the smith a blow in the face and cried wildly, "They're fighting us, lads!"
At that moment, the first smith got up and, scratching his bruised face to make it bleed, shouted in a tearful voice, "Police! Murder! They've killed a man, lads!"
"Oh, gracious me, a man beaten to death! Killed!" screamed a woman coming out of a gate close by.
A crowd gathered round the blood-stained smith.
"Haven't you robbed people enough? Taking their lost shirts?" said a voice addressing the publican. "What have you killed a man for, you thief?"
The tall lad, standing in the porch, turned his bleared eyes from the publican to the smith and back again, as if considering whom he ought to fight now.
"Murderer!" he shouted suddenly to the publican. "Bind him, lads!"
Did someone die? Okay. "I dare say you would like to bind me," shouted the publican, pushing away the men advancing on him, and snatching his cap from his head, he flung it on the ground.
As if this action had some mysterious and menacing significance, the workmen surrounding the publican paused in indecision.
I really like that.
Have I ever told you about that amazing, like one of my favorite stories happened in a club with Utkarsh and our one other friend? Oh my god, it's really good. Should I tell you right now? I feel like we just started reading.
Come on, now you have to.
No, but I could do it later.
Okay. It's up to you.
Later.
Okay. I know the law very well, mates. I'll take the matter to the captain of police. You think I won't get to him? Robbery is not permitted to anybody nowadays, shouted the publican, picking up his cap.
Come along then, come along then! The publican and the tall young fellow repeated one after the other, and they moved up the street together.
The blood-stained smith went beside them. The factory hands and others followed behind, talking and shouting.
At the corner, I don't think anyone's dead.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think they were just like,
what is this all about?
Murder! I don't know.
At the corner of the Moroseca, opposite a large house with closed shutters and bearing bootmaker's signboard, stood a score of thin, worn-out, gloomy-faced bootmakers, wearing overalls and long, tattered coats.
He should pay folks off properly, a thin working man with frowning brows and a straggly beard was saying.
But he sucked our blood and now he thinks he's quit of us. He's been misleading us all the week, and now that he's brought us to this pass, he's made off. The shit is everyone talking about?
On seeing the crowd and the bloodstained man, the workmen ceased speaking, and with eager curiosity, all the bootmakers joined the moving crowd.
Where are all the folks going?
Why, to the police, of course.
I say, is it true that we have been beaten?
And what do you think? Look what folks are saying.
Questions and answers were heard. The publican, taking advantage of the increased crowd, dropped behind and returned to his step-foot.
The tall youth, not noticing the disappearance of his foe, waved his bare arm and went on talking incessantly, attracting general attention to himself. It was around him that the people chiefly crowded, expecting answers from him to the questions that occupied all their minds.
He must keep order, keep the law. That's what the government is there for. Am I not right, good Christians? Said the tall youth with a scarcely perceptible smile. He thinks there's no government? How can one do without government? Or else there would be plenty who'd rob us.
Why talk nonsense? Rejoined voices in the crowd. Will they give up Moscow like this? They told you that for fun, and you believed it. Aren't there plenty of troops on the march? Let 'em in, indeed. That's what the government is for. You'd better listen to what people are saying, said some of the mob, pointing to the tall youth.
By the wall of Chinatown, what?
Huh.
A small group of people were gathered round a man in a frieze coat who held a paper in his hand.
An ukase. They are reading an ukase. What is an ukase? An edict. Ukase.
Yeah.
Excuse me. An edict of the Russian government. They are reading a ukase. Reading a ukase, cried voices in the crowd, and the people rushed toward the reader.
The man in the frieze coat was reading the broadsheet of August 31st. When the crowd collected round him, he seemed confused, but at the demand of the tall lad who had pushed his way up to him, he began in a rather tremulous voice to read the sheet from the beginning.
Early tomorrow I shall go to His Serene Highness, he read. Serene Highness, said the tall fellow, with a triumphant smile on his lips and a frown on his brow.
What?
Does he not know the word serene?
Oh, maybe it's his accent.
Serene Highness. To consult with him to act, and to aid the army to exterminate these scoundrels. We too will take part, the reader went on, and then paused. Do you see, shouted the youth victoriously, he's going to clear up the whole affair for you. In destroying them, and will send these visitors to the devil. I will come back to dinner, and we'll set to work. We will completely do, and undo these scoundrels.
The last words were read out in the midst of complete silence. The tall lad hung his head gloomily. It was evident that no one had understood the last part. In particular, the words, I will come back to dinner, evidently displeased both reader and audience. The people's minds were tuned to a high pitch, and this was too simple and needlessly comprehensible. It was what any one of them might have said, and therefore was what a new case, emanating from the highest authority, should not say. That's a very funny analysis.
They all stood despondent and silent. The tall youth moved his lips and swayed from side to side.
We should ask him. That's he himself? Yes, ask him indeed. Why not? He'll explain, voices in the rear of the crowd were suddenly heard saying, and the general attention turned to the police superintendent's trap, which drove into the square attended by 2 mounted dragoons.
The superintendent of police, who had gone that morning by Count Rostopchin's orders to burn the barges and had in connection with that matter acquired a large sum of money, which was at that moment in his pocket, on seeing a crowd bearing down upon him, told his coachman to stop.
What people are these? He shouted to the men who were moving singly and timidly, in the direction of his trap.
What people are these? He shouted again, receiving no answer.
Your Honor, replied the shopman in the frieze coat. Your Honor, in accord with the proclamation of the Highest Excellency the Count, of His Highest Excellency the Count, they desire to serve, not sparing their lives, and it is not any kind of riot, but as His Highest Excellence said,
the Count is not left. He is here, and an order will be issued concerning you, said the superintendent of police. Go on, he ordered his coachman.
The crowd halted, pressing around those who had heard what the superintendent had said, and looking at the departing trap.
The superintendent of police looked round at that moment with a scared look, said something to his coachman, and his horses increased their speed.
It's a fraud, lads. Lead the way to him himself, shouted the tall youth. Don't let him go, lads. Let him answer us. Keep him, shouted different people, and the people dashed in pursuit of the trap.
Following the superintendent of police and talking loudly, the crowd went in the direction of the Lubyanka Street.
There now. The gentry and merchants have gone away and left us to perish. I think we're dogs, voices in the crowd were heard saying more and more frequently.
Cool.
I just realized that. They just realized that?
Yes.
Cool.
I kind of feel like Tolstoy just thinks that all the lower class are just constantly rioting and drunk.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Chapter 24. On the evening of the 1st of September, after his interview with Kutuzov, Count Rostopchin had returned to Moscow mortified and offended because he had not been invited to attend the Council of War and because Kutuzov had paid no attention to his offer to take part in the defense of the city. Amazed also at the novel outlook revealed to him at the camp, which treated the tranquility of the capital and its patriotic fervor as not merely secondary, but quite irrelevant and unimportant matters. Distressed, offended, and surprised by all this, Rostopchin had returned to Moscow. After supper, he lay down on a sofa without undressing and was awakened soon after midnight by a courier bringing him a letter from Kutuzov. This letter requested the Count to send police officers to guide the troops through the town, as the army was retreating to the Ryazan road beyond Moscow. This was not news to Rostopchin. He had known that Moscow would be abandoned not merely since his interview the previous day with Kutuzov on the Poklony Hill, but ever since the Battle of Borodino. For all the generals who came to Moscow after that battle had said unanimously that it was impossible to fight another battle. And since then, the government property had been removed every night, and half the inhabitants had left the city with Rostopchin's own permission. Yet all the same, this information astonished and irritated the Count, coming as it did in the form of a simple note, with an order from Kutuzov, and received at night, breaking in on his beauty sleep.
I'm so resistant to acclimating to Rostopchin. I'm like, who's this guy?
You're like,
I'm not accepting him into the fold of characters to focus on.
Yeah, actually, I kind of feel that too.
You know what I mean? It's like, no.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's too many people or just that I'm like, this is just like an unnecessary count. I don't know.
Yeah, I remember when he first came up, I was like, nah, he won't be important.
I know. I feel really annoyed that he is.
Yeah.
When later on in his memoirs, Count Rostopchin explained his actions at the time, he repeatedly says that he was then actuated by two important considerations: to maintain tranquility in Moscow and expedite the departure of the inhabitants. If one accepts this twofold aim, all Rostopchin's actions appear irreproachable. Why were the holy relics, the arms, ammunition, gunpowder, and stores of corn not removed? Why were thousands of inhabitants deceived into believing that Moscow would not be given up and thereby ruined? To preserve the tranquility of the city, explains Count Rostopchin. Why were bundles of useless papers from the government offices and Lepish's balloon and other articles removed? To leave the town empty, explains Count Rostopchin. One need only admit that public tranquility is in danger, and any action finds a justification.
All the horrors of the Reign of Terror were based only on solicitude for public tranquility.
On what then was Count Rostopchin's fear for the tranquility of Moscow based in 1812? What reason was there for assuming any probability of an uprising in the city? The inhabitants were leaving it, and the retreating troops were filling it. Why should that cause the masses to riot?
Neither in Moscow nor anywhere in Russia did anything resembling an insurrection ever occur when the enemy entered a town. More than 10,000 people were still in Moscow on the 1st and 2nd of September. And except for a mob in the governor's courtyard assembled there at his meeting, nothing happened. It is obvious that there would have been even less reason to expect a disturbance among the people if after the Battle of Borodino, when the surrender of Moscow became certain, or at least probable, Rostopchin, instead of exciting the people by distributing arms and broadsheets, had taken steps to remove all the holy relics, the gunpowder, munitions, and money, and had told the population plainly that the town would be abandoned.
Rostopchin, though he had patriotic sentiments, was a sanguine and impulsive man who had always moved in the highest administrative, no understanding or guiding. Ever since the enemy's entry into Smolensk, he had in imagination been playing the role of director of the popular feeling of the heart of Russia. Not only did it seem to him, as to all administrators, that he controlled the external actions of Moscow's inhabitants, but he also thought he controlled their mental attitude by means of his broadsheets and posters, written in a coarse tone which the people despise in their own class and do not understand from those in authority. Okay. Rostopchin was so pleased with the fine role of leader of popular feeling, and had grown so used to it, that the necessity of relinquishing that role and abandoning Moscow without any heroic display took him unawares, and he suddenly felt the ground slip away from under his feet, so that he positively did not know what to do. Though he knew it was coming, he did not till the last moment wholeheartedly believe that Moscow would be abandoned, and did not prepare for it. The inhabitants left against his wishes. If the government offices were removed, this was only done on the demand of officials to whom the Count yielded reluctantly. He was absorbed in the role he had created for himself. Does this sound like anyone?
Yeah, seriously. So interesting.
As is often the case with those gifted with an ardent imagination, though he had long known that Moscow would be abandoned, he knew it only with his intellect. He did not believe it in his heart and did not adapt himself mentally to this new position of affairs.
All his painstaking and energetic activity, and how far it was useful and had any effect on the people is another question, had been simply directed toward arousing in the masses his own feeling of patriotic hatred of the French.
But when events assumed their true historical character, when expressing hatred for the French in words proved insufficient, when it was not even possible to express that hatred by fighting a battle, when self-confidence was of no avail in relation to the one question before Moscow, when the whole population streamed out of Moscow as one man, abandoning their belongings and proving by that negative action all the depth of their national feeling, then the role chosen by Rostopchin suddenly appeared senseless. He unexpectedly felt himself ridiculous, weak, and alone, with no ground to stand on.
When, awakened from his sleep, he received that cold, peremptory note from Kutuzov, he felt the more irritated the more he felt himself to blame. All that he had been specially put in charge of, the state property which he should have removed, was still in Moscow, and it was no longer possible to take the hold of it away.
Who is to blame for it? Who has let things come to such a pass, he ruminated. Not I, of course. I had everything ready. I had Moscow firmly in hand, and this is what they have let it come to. Villains. Traitors, he thought, without clearly defining who the villains and traitors were, but feeling it necessary to hate those traitors, whoever they might be, who were to blame for the false and ridiculous position in which he found himself.
All that night, Count Rostopchin issued orders, for which people came to him from all parts of Moscow. Those about him had never seen the Count so morose and irritable.
I like him more now. He's so absurd.
He's
I like people.
a character now?
Yeah, what do you think? He's like, I will none of you, traitors! Yeah, but it's all about him. That's funny.
He's like the Minister of Magic. What's his name again? I can't remember his name.
How could you not remember the name of the Minister of Magic?
Ugh, you know what we need to read next? Harry Potter.
Oh my god.
Like all 7.
You'd like love that, wouldn't you?
We'd be kid appropriate.
No.
No, we wouldn't.
I don't know how to be kid appropriate, which is ironic.
Yeah, actually.
On Sesame Street, if there were children there, somebody would be like, sky's blue, sky's blue. That meant, don't freaking curse.
Sky's blue?
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, really? That was so hard.
That was a signifier to not.
Right.
So if someone cursed, you'd be like, hello? Sky's blue. And I'd be like, shit. God, fuck. That's where I started saying mother of pearl.
Oh! Yeah.
My friend Chris, who is also my friend, show used it, and I was like, oh, that's good. Because you have a whole 2 syllables to
You had to slow change course.
Mother of pearl. Yeah. Okay. Your Excellency, the director of the Registrar's Department has sent for instructions from the consistory, from the Senate, from the university, from the Foundling Hospital, the suffragan, I don't know, has sent asking for information. What are your orders about the fire brigade? From the governor of the prison, from the superintendent of the lunatic asylum. What is happening?
All night long, such announcements were continually being received by the Count.
To all these inquiries, he gave brief and angry replies, indicating that orders from him were not now needed, that the whole affair, carefully prepared by him, had now been ruined by somebody, and that somebody would have to bear the whole responsibility for all that might happen.
Oh, tell that blockhead, he said in reply to the question from the Registrar's Department, that he should remain to guard his documents. Now, why are you asking silly questions about the fire brigade? They have horses, let them off to Vladimir, and not leave them to the French.
Your Excellency, the superintendent of the lunatic asylum has come. What are your commands?
My commands? Let them go away, that's all. And let the lunatics out into the town. When lunatics command our armies, God evidently means these other madmen to be free.
In reply to an inquiry, don't you like him now?
Right, Greg. He's like, let them out.
In reply to an inquiry about the convicts in the prison, Count Rostopchin shouted angrily at the governor.
Do you expect me to give you 2 battalions, which we have not got for a convoy? Release them. That's all about it.
Your Excellency, there are some political prisoners, Meshkov, Vereshchagin.
Vereshchagin. Hasn't he been hanged yet? Shouted Rostopchin. Bring him to me.
To hang him?
Guess so. I'll hang him myself.
I will wring his neck.
He's to blame.
Oh my god.
That's the traitor.
Rostopchin.
No, it's Vereshchagin.
No, Rostopchin, I'm into you now.
Oh, you're
Yeah, Rostopchin.
You showed your true colors.
I've been waiting for these true colors. This whole time, he's just been like back dealing.
You've just been issuing broadsheets.
I've been like, stop with the broadsheets, dude. Quit hiding behind your broad. He totally wasn't hiding, but chapter 20.
He was a bit transparent, and by that I mean like cellophane. You know, like he never really stood for anything because he was just.
You think that about everyone.
A politician. What a politician.
You think that about everyone. You're like, Pierre stands for nothing.
Anyway.
Interesting. You know what else is interesting?
What?
That song from Chicago called Mr. Cellophane.
That's what I thought of. I was like, oh, Bruise Clues. Or what was it called?
Blues Clues?
No. What's the stupid? Oh, now I have to look it up. Wait, first of all, John C. Reilly. What's it called? Rules. That's what it is. Not Bruise Clues. Rules. Have you ever seen this?
I can't remember.
I just need rules.
Should I keep reading while you... We're watching something on YouTube?
Yeah.
We can't watch something on YouTube.
No?
No. We have to do it after.
I have some things that I really want to get in a bag.
All right.
These are very precious to me.
Yeah, we're gonna bag it.
Bag it.
Bag it.
We cannot watch a video on the stream. That's taking it to a whole other level.
Okay, fine. Rules.
We will watch it thereafter and report back on it. Chapter 25.
Check it out.
Check it out.
Okay, chapter 25.
Toward 9 o'clock in the morning, when the troops were already moving through Moscow, nobody came to the Count anymore for instructions. Those who were able to get away were going of their own accord. Those who remained behind decided for themselves what they must do.
The Count ordered his carriage that he might drive to Sokolniki, and sat in his study with folded hands, morose, sallow, and taciturn.
In quiet and untroubled times, it seems to every administrator that it is only by his efforts that the whole population under his... We can add someone to Tolstoy's list of hatred and contempt. Administrators.
Administrator. Justifiably so.
Listen,
Ugh.
I talked to someone.
Ugh, they just administer. Okay, keep going.
It appears to every administrator that it is only by his efforts that the whole population under his rule is kept going. And in this consciousness of being indispensable, every administrator finds the chief reward of his labor and efforts. While the sea of history remains calm, the ruler administrator, in his frail bark, holding on with a boat hook to the ship of the people and himself moving, naturally imagines that his efforts move the ship he is holding on to. But as soon as a storm arises and the sea begins to heave and the ship to move, such a delusion is no longer possible. The ship moves independently with its own enormous motion. The boat hook no longer reaches the moving vessel, and suddenly the administrator, instead of appearing a ruler in this office of power, becomes an insignificant, useless, and feeble man. Rostopchin felt this, and it was this which exasperated him. The superintendent of police, whom the crowd had stopped, went in to see him at the same time as an adjutant who informed the Count that the horses were harnessed. They were both pale, and the superintendent of police, after reporting that he had executed the instructions he had received, informed the Count that an immense crowd had collected in the courtyard and wished to see him. Without saying a word, Rostopchin rose and walked hastily to his light, luxurious drawing room, went to the balcony door, took hold of the handle, let it go again, and went to the window from which he had a better view of the whole crowd. The tall lad was standing in front, flourishing his arm and saying something with a stern look. The blood-stained Smith stood beside him with a gloomy face. A drone of voices was audible through the closed window.
Is my carriage ready? Asked Rostopchin, stepping back from the window.
It is, Your Excellency, replied the adjutant.
Rostopchin went again to the balcony door.
But what do they want? He asked the superintendent of police.
Your Excellency, they say they have got ready, according to your orders, to go against the French, and they shouted something about treachery. But it is a turbulent crowd, Your Excellency. I hardly managed to get away from it. Your Excellency, I venture to suggest...
You may go. I don't need you to tell me what to do, exclaimed Rostopchin angrily.
Yes, you do. He stood by the balcony door, looking at the crowd.
This is what they have done with Russia. This is what they have done with me, thought he, full of an irrepressible fury that welled up within him against the someone to whom what was happening might be attributed. As often happens with passionate people, he was mastered by anger, but was still seeking an object on which to vent it. Here is that mob, the dregs of the people, he thought as he gazed at the crowd. This rabble they have roused by their folly. They want a victim, he thought, as he looked at the tall lad flourishing his arm. And this thought occurred to him just because he himself desired a victim. Something on which to vent his rage.
Is the carriage ready? He asked again.
Yes, Your Excellency. What are your orders about Vereshchagin? He's waiting on the porch, said the adjutant.
Ah, exclaimed Rostopchin, as if struck by an unexpected recollection.
And rapidly opening the door, he went resolutely out onto the balcony. The talking instantly ceased. Hats and caps were doffed, and all eyes were raised to the Count.
Good morning, lads, said the Count briskly and loudly. Thank you for coming. I'll come to you in a moment, but we must first settle with the villain. We must punish the villain who has caused the ruin of Moscow. Wait for me.
And the Count stepped as briskly back into the room and slammed the door behind him.
A murmur of approbation and satisfaction ran through the crowd. He'll settle with all the villains, you'll see. And you said the French. He'll show you what law is. The mob were saying as if reproving one another for their lack of confidence.
A few minutes later, an officer came hurriedly out of the front door, gave an order, and the dragoons formed up in line. The crowd moved eagerly from the balcony toward the porch. Rostopchin, coming out there with quick, angry steps, looked hastily around as if seeking someone.
Where is he? Inquired. And as he spoke, he saw a young man coming round the corner of the house between two dragoons. He had a long, thin neck, and his head, that had been half shaved, was again covered by short hair. This young man was dressed in a threadbare blue cloth coat lined with fox fur that had once been smart, and dirty hempen convict's trousers, over which were pulled his thin, dirty, trodden-down boots. On his thin, weak legs were heavy chains, which hampered his irresolute movements.
This is such a perfect hipster outfit, except for the chains.
The chains could work too.
Ah, said Rostopchin, hurriedly turning away his eyes from the young man in the fur-lined coat and pointing to the bottom step of the porch. Put him there.
The young man in his clattering chains stepped clumsily to the spot indicated, holding away with one finger the coat collar which chafed his neck, turned his long neck twice this way and that, sighed, and submissively folded before him his thin hands, unused to work.
For several seconds, while the young man was taking his place on the... Is this Vereshchagin as a kid? While the young man was taking his place on the step, the silence continued. Only among the back rows of the people, who were all pressing toward the one spot, could sighs, groans, and the shuffling of feet be heard.
While waiting for the young man to take his place on the step, Rostopchin stood frowning and rubbing his face with his hand.
Lads, said he, with a metallic ring in his voice, this man, Vereshchagin, is the scoundrel by whose doing Moscow is perishing.
The young man in the fur-lined coat, stooping a little, stood in a submissive attitude, his fingers clasped before him. His emaciated young face, disfigured by the half-shaven head, hung down hopelessly. At the Count's first words, he raised it slowly and looked up at him as if wishing to say something, or at least to meet his eye. But Rostopchin did not look at him. A vein in the young man's long, thin neck swelled like a cord and went blue behind the ear, and suddenly his face flushed.
Creepy. All eyes were fixed on him. He looked at the crowd and, rendered more hopeful by the expression he read on the faces there, he smiled sadly and timidly, and lowering his head, shifted his feet on the step.
He has betrayed his Tsar and his country. He has gone over to Bonaparte. He alone of all the Russians has disgraced the Russian name. He has caused Moscow to perish, said Rostopchin in a sharp, even voice. But suddenly he glanced down at Vereshchagin, who continued to stand in the same submissive attitude. As if inflamed by the sight, he raised his arm and addressed the people, almost shouting,
Deal with him as you think fit. I hand him over to you.
The crowd remained
It's
silent.
not going to go badly.
Okay.
I mean, it might go badly for Rostopchin.
I'm like, they're going to eat him.
No, they are.
Okay.
Maybe they will.
The crowd remained silent and only pressed closer and closer to one another. To keep one another back, to breathe in that stifling atmosphere, to be unable to stir, and to await something unknown, uncomprehended, and terrible, was becoming unbearable. Those standing in the front, who had seen and heard what had taken place before them, all stood with wide-open eyes and mouths, straining with all their strength, and held back the crowd that was pushing behind them.
Beat him! Let the traitor perish and not disgrace the Russian name, shouted Rostopchin. Cut him down! I command it!
Hearing not so much the words as the angry tone of Rostopchin's voice, the crowd moaned and heaved forward, but again paused.
Count! Exclaimed the timid yet theatrical voice of Vereshchagin in the midst of the momentary silence that ensued. Count! One God is above us both. He lifted his head, and again the thick vein in his thin neck filled with blood, and the color rapidly came and went in his face.
He did not finish what he wished to say.
Cut him down! I command it! Shouted Rostopchin, suddenly growing pale like Vereshchagin.
Draw sabers! Cried the dragoon officer, drawing his own.
Another, still stronger wave flowed through the crowd and, reaching the front ranks, carried it swaying to the very steps of the porch. The tall youth, with a stony look on his face and rigid and uplifted arm, stood beside Vereshchagin.
Saber him, the dragoon officer almost whispered.
And one of the soldiers, his face all at once distorted with fury, struck Vereshchagin on the head with the blunt side of his saber.
Ah! Cried Vereshchagin in meek surprise, looking around with a frightened glance as if not understanding why this was done to him.
I think it was more like, oh!
Oh!
Yeah.
Oh! Because it's like, in a meek surprise. Oh! Maybe like that.
Ah.
A similar moan of surprise and horror. Oh! Ran through the crowd. Oh Lord! Exclaimed the sorrowful voice.
But after the exclamation of surprise that had escaped from Vereshchagin, he uttered a plaintive cry of pain, and that cry was fatal. Just kidding. We're going to eat him.
Great.
The barrier of human feelings, strained to the utmost, that had held the crowd in check suddenly broke. The crime had begun and must now be completed. The plaintive moan of reproach was drowned by the threatening and angry roar of the crowd. Like the seventh and last wave that shatters a ship, that last irresistible wave burst from the rear and reached the front ranks, carrying them off their feet and engulfing them all. The dragoon was about to repeat his blow. Vereshchagin, with a cry of honor, covering his head with his hands, rushed toward the crowd. The tall youth against whom he stumbled seized his thin neck with his hands and, yelling wildly, fell with him under the feet of the pressing, struggling crowd.
Some beat and tore at Vereshchagin, others at the tall youth, and the screams of those who were being trampled on and of those who tried to rescue the tall lad only increased the fury of the crowd. It was a long time before the dragoons could extricate the bleeding youth, beaten almost to death, and for a long time, despite the feverish haste with which the mob tried to end the work that had been begun, those who were hitting, throttling, and tearing at Vereshchagin were unable to kill him, for the crowd pressed from all sides, swaying as one mass with them in the center and rendering it impossible for them either to kill him or let him go.
Hit him with an axe, eh? Crushed? Traitor, he sold Christ. What? Still alive. Tenacious. Serves him right. Torture serves a thief right. Use the hatchet. What? Still alive? This fucking happened.
Well, only when the victim ceased to struggle and his cries changed to a long-drawn, measured death rattle did the crowd around him prostrate. Bleeding corpses began rapidly to change places. Each one came up, glanced at what had been done, and with horror, reproach, and astonishment pushed back again.
Lord, the people are like wild beasts. How could he be alive? Voices in the crowd could be heard saying, quite a young fellow, too. Must have been a merchant's son. Oh, what man. And they say he's not the right one. How not the right one? What is happening? Oh, Lord, and there's another has been beaten, too. They say he's nearly done for. Oh, the people. Aren't they afraid of sinning? Said the same mob now, looking with pain and distress at the dead body with its long, thin, half-severed neck, and its livid face stained with blood and dust.
A painstaking police officer,
Jesus.
considering the presence of a corpse in His Excellency's courtyard unseemly, told the dragoons to take it away. 2 dragoons took it by its distorted legs and dragged it along the ground. The gory, dust-stained, half-shaven head with its long neck trailed twisting along the ground. The crowd shrank back from it.
At the moment when Vereshchagin fell, and the crowd closed in with savage yells and swayed about him, Rostopchin suddenly turned pale, and instead of going to the back entrance where his carriage awaited him, went with hurried steps and bent head, not knowing where and why, along the passage leading to the rooms on the ground floor. The Count's face was white, and he could not control the feverish twitching of his lower jaw. Jesus.
This way, Your Excellency. Where are you going? This way, please, said a trembling, frightened voice behind him.
Count Rostopchin was unable to reply, and, turning obediently, went in the direction indicated. At the back entrance stood his caleche. The distant roar of the yelling crowd was audible even there. He hastily took his seat and told the coachman to drive to his country house in Sokolniki.
When they reached the Myatnitsky street and could no longer hear the shouts of the mob, the Count began to repent. He remembered with dissatisfaction the agitation and fear he had betrayed before his subordinates. The mob was terrible, disgusting, he said to himself in French. They're like wolves whom nothing but flesh can appease. Count, one God is above us both. Vereshchagin's words suddenly recurred to him, and a disagreeable shiver ran down his back. This was only a momentary feeling, and Count Rostopchin smiled disdainfully at himself. I had other duties, thought he. The people had to be appeased. Many other victims have perished and are perishing for the public good. And he began thinking of his social duties to his family and to the city entrusted to him, and of himself. Not himself as Fyodor Vasilievich Rostopchin. He fancied that Fyodor Vasilievich Rostopchin was sacrificing himself for the public good, but himself as governor, the representative of authority and of the Tsar. Had it been simply Fyodor Vasilievich, my course of action would have been quite different, but it was my duty to safeguard my life and dignity as commander-in-chief.
Lightly swaying on the flexible springs of his carriage and no longer hearing the terrible sounds of the crowd, Rostopchin grew physically calm, and, as always happens, as soon as he became physically tranquil, his mind devised reasons why he should be mentally tranquil too. Is that really what happens? The thought which tranquilized Rostopchin was not a new one. Since the world began and men have killed one another, no one has ever committed such a crime against his fellow man without comforting himself with this same idea. The idea is le bien public, the hypothetical welfare of other people.
To a man not swayed by passion, that welfare is never certain, but he who commits such a crime always knows just where that welfare lies. And Rostopchin now knew it.
Not only did his reason not reproach him for what he had done, but he even found cause for self-satisfaction in having so successfully contrived to avail himself of a convenient opportunity to punish a criminal and at the same time pacify the mob.
Vereshchagin was tried and condemned to death, thought Rostopchin, though the Senate had only condemned Vereshchagin to hard labor. He was a traitor and a spy. I could not let him go unpunished, and so I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. To appease the mob, I gave them a victim, and at the same time punished a miscreant.
Having reached his country house and begun to give orders about domestic arrangements, the Count grew quite tranquil.
Half an hour later, he was driving with his fast horses across the Sokolniki field, but no longer thinking of what had occurred, but considering what was to come. He was driving to the Yauza Bridge, where he had heard that Kutuzov was. Count Rostopchin was mentally preparing the angry and stinging reproaches he meant to address to Kutuzov for his deception. He would make that foxy old courtier feel the full responsibility for all the calamities that would follow the abandonment of the city and the ruin of Russia.
Foxy old courtier.
As Rostopchin regarded it, would fall upon his doting old head. Planning beforehand what he would say to Kutuzov, Rostopchin turned angrily in his caleche and gazed sternly from side to side.
The Sokolniki field was deserted. Only at the end of it, in front of the almshouse and the lunatic asylum, could be seen some people in white and others like them walking singly. Am I misreading that? Across the field, shouting and gesticulating.
One of these was running to cross the path of Count Rostopchin's carriage, and the Count himself, his coachman, and his dragoons looked with vague horror and curiosity at these released lunatics, and especially at the one running toward them.
Swaying from side to side on his long, thin legs in his fluttering dressing gown, this lunatic was running impetuously, his gaze fixed on Rostopchin, shouting something in a hoarse voice and making signs to him to stop. The lunatic's solemn, gloomy face was thin and yellow with its beard growing in uneven tufts. His black agate, I never know how to say that.
I think that's right, agate.
Pupils with saffron yellow whites moved restlessly near the lower eyelids. Ew.
Stop! Pull up, I tell you, he cried in a piercing voice, and again shouted something breathlessly with emphatic intonations and gestures.
Coming abreast of the caleche, he ran beside it.
Thrice have they slain me, thrice have I risen from the dead. They stoned me, crucified me. I shall rise, shall rise, shall rise. They have torn my body. The kingdom of heaven will be overthrown. Thrice will I overthrow it and thrice reestablish it, he cried, raising his voice higher and higher.
What?
I think he thinks he's Jesus.
Count Rostopchin suddenly grew pale, as he had done when the crowd closed in on Vereshchagin. He turned away. Go faster, he cried in a trembling voice to his coachman. The caleche flew over the ground as fast as the horses could draw it, but for a long time, Count Rostopchin still heard the insane, despairing screams growing fainter in the distance, while his eyes saw nothing but the astonished, frightened, blood-stained face of the traitor in the fur-lined coat.
Recent as that mental picture was, Rostopchin already felt that it had cut deep into his heart and drawn blood. Even now, he felt clearly that the gory trace of that recollection would not pass with time, but that the terrible memory would, on the contrary, dwell in his heart ever more cruelly and painfully to the end of his life. He seemed still to hear the sound of his own words. Cut him down. I command it.
Why did I utter those words? It was by some accident I said them. Not have said them, he thought, and then nothing would have happened. He saw the frightened and then infuriated face of the dragoon who dealt the blow. The look of silent, timid reproach that boy in the fur-lined coat had turned upon him. But I did not do it for my own sake. I was bound to act that way. The mob, the traitor, the public welfare, thought he.
The public welfare.
Le what public?
The welfare public. I forgot what it was. I forgot.
Did you know that Van
Oh, le bien public.
Le bien?
Le bien.
Le bien.
The good.
The good of the public.
Yeah.
Did you know that Van Leeuwen had a ginger lemon poppy?
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Ginger lemon pop. Ginger.
I find this thought thrilling.
Troops were still crowding at the Yauza Bridge. It was
Yauza.
hot.
I love the Yauza Bridge.
I hope we're pronouncing it right.
I mean, if it's not Yauza, they were pronouncing it wrong.
Right. That's how it was meant
Yes,
to be said.
absolutely.
Kutuzov, dejected and frowning, sat on a bench by the bridge, toying with his whip in the sand. Just casually. My whip. Whip is such a funny weapon.
I know,
Anyway.
it's really strange that they all have it.
A man in a general's uniform with plumes in his hat went up to Kutuzov and said something in French. It was Count Rostopchin. He told Kutuzov that he had come because Moscow, the capital, was no more, and only the army remained.
Things would have been different if your Serene Highness had not told me that you would not abandon Moscow with another battle. All this would not have happened, he said.
God, what a little bitch.
I know, I love him.
Ugh. Kutuzov looked at Rostopchin as if not grasping what was said to him. He was trying to read something peculiar written at that moment on the face of the man addressing him.
I'm going to pull that shit all the time now.
Huh?
Mm.
It's a good look.
I'm not quite.
Mm.
He's talking to him like he's not the head of the army that's supposed to
Pretty
defend Moscow.
And he's like, "Meh."
If you had told me that you had no intention of protecting Russia.
Moscow's gone, and it's because you didn't give me the right information.
Yeah.
Rostopchin grew confused and became silent. Kutuzov slightly
That's why-
shook his
that's
head.
why I
yeah,
didn't do
no, because if someone were to do that with me, I'd be like,
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of goes away. Anyway. Kutuzov slightly shook his head and, taking his penetrating gaze from Rostopchin's face, muttered softly.
No, I shall not give up Moscow without a battle.
Whether Kutuzov was thinking of something entirely different when he spoke those words, or uttered them purposely, knowing them to be meaningless, at any rate, Rostopchin made no reply, and hastily left him. And strange to say, the governor of Moscow, the proud Count Rostopchin, took up a Cossack whip and went to the bridge, where he began, with shouts, to drive on the carts that blocked the way. What?
Oh,
Oof.
Rostopchin.
Ugh,
What?
did not enjoy that chapter.
You didn't?
No.
It was
Beating
upsetting.
of a man.
Yeah.
Who also I don't think did anything wrong.
Wasn't he the one who was like not gonna tell on the postman?
Yeah.
I thought he was old for sure.
Do you want to call it?
How long is this?
11 pages. Yeah. All right,
There we cease.
that's the show.
Oh, such almost good timing.